everyone around the world, and thank you for joining us for this important webinar sponsored by MSM. My name is Alex Parnia. I'm the president of the MSM USA. And MSM's mission is to make education accessible to all by helping colleges and universities in Canada, UK, US, and Australia to attract international applicants and students, among many other services that it provides. We are one day away from the most consequential presidential election in the United States. And I'm delighted that I have two distinguished colleagues of mine, Dr. Debbie Ronald, who is the former president of the Claremont Graduate University and now serves on a variety of boards, including Los Angeles Children's Hospital and the world's renowned Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Mr. Fred Siegel is former director of admissions at Boston University. He also served as assistant vice president of admissions at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. They have joined me today to discuss the implications of the election on higher education, depending on who gets elected, either President Trump or Vice President Biden. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Debbie Ronald to say a few words, and then followed by Fred Siegel. And then we will get into some questions and answers about the implications of this important election. Debbie, please.
Well, I think if Mr. Biden wins, it will provide universities an unprecedented opportunity for creativity when it comes to foreign students. US universities will definitely want foreign students back on campus and to be enrolled, whether it's online or on campus. I think the new normal will not be the same as it is now. I think that there'll be an even greater role going forward for online education and for partnerships whereby our students can learn together. And so we're going to learn and take the learning from online and apply it. We're all learning to do it better. For example, I'm teaching a course now on COVID, and I expressly, on purpose, started it at about 6 p.m. California time, so that, for example, students in China and Korea and India could take the class during reasonable times. And they're very involved with the class, and they're getting to know our students better. So I do believe that there are going to be unprecedented opportunities for the way we teach and what we do. And I think that the US will be very open to that type of creativity. So rather than focus solely on finance, which is a huge issue over here, we can focus on what the opportunities are going forward, and to welcome foreign students even more in a creative way, making them feel part of the community wherever they are. And also, for example, because COVID is on everybody's minds, it also provides an opportunity educationally for all of us to understand what goes on in other countries, other cultures, and those are educational opportunities that I think many universities will want to take advantage of.
Thank you, Debbie. Fred, please.
Thanks very much, Alex. It's great to see you, Debbie, and it's a privilege to speak with people from all over the world. I'm talking to you this morning from Washington, D.C., about 4 miles from the White House. So you can imagine how exciting it is to be living here and seeing what will happen over the next few days. Of course, I agree with what Debbie just said, that the opportunities resulting from COVID and this election are going to be grand. In down stock markets, there are always values to invest in, and I think that opportunity is really a theme for the morning. You might remember, most people around the world will understand that the demographics in the U.S. of 18-year-olds going down in 1979 to 1993 is what made international recruiting so important for US institutions. Demographics are headed down in the US. The economy has been affected by COVID, and there's no question that this is going to be an opportunity for universities to think creatively. I totally agree with what Debbie said. Probably under the Biden administration, there will be more of that. I think he is much more focused on accessibility and affordability for US students. In a Trump administration, I will say that I think that US higher education lobbying will have to intensify and base their arguments surely on the economic impact of lower enrollments on cities and towns. International students specifically and students in general provide a great economic boon to the cities and towns where the institutions are located. And there's no question that if this really continues, if enrollments decline, the US higher education industry is going to have to step up lobbying to either administration. We are at an inflection point. There's no question in US higher ed that if you look to some research of Dr. Scott Galloway at NYU, he has projected that 500 American colleges and universities will either close or merge over the next few years. Think about what that might mean. That would be a long process. It wouldn't happen overnight. The closing of a university can take 2 and 3 years. But the question will be, how will those new universities find their enrollments? And again, I think that universities are going to be more inclined to work with third-party providers, in fact, because they'll be forced to. And in fact, the hesitation and the cautionary tones of US enrollment managers in not wanting to work with third-party providers, I feel very certain will change over time. I guess I'd end by saying that I do work with individual students now. I have one in Beijing, and I have one on the outskirts of Shanghai. One is a transfer student to Boston University as a junior, and he's never been there. My student in Beijing is a senior at the University of Texas looking to apply to American graduate schools. The real question is going to be, will this increased technology and architecture for online allow international students to work from home? I think that's going to be a huge question for the future.
I think it will, and that it will have to, and that will bring unprecedented opportunities. A lot of universities are experimenting with online being synchronous and asynchronous. And by the word synchronous, we mean all students are online with the faculty member at the same time. Asynchronous is the reverse, where the faculty member is either lecturing or doing engaging things. Imagine how much more education and opportunity we could give to foreign students all over the world by using that model. Because if the synchronous time is at a time that works all over the world, or if you don't have to do the second class in person, then you can do the first class more often. And I think bringing students from everywhere around the world together and learning from each other while we're working at home and actually talking about those things as examples of whatever we're doing in class will bring unprecedented opportunities for learning and for learning other cultures and for preparing our students to work in what is already a global world, but in a much more effective way. So, and I believe that we will start new programs as a result of that, not only the ones that we have. And as we learn more about the technology and we create new ones, we will want to use them more and more. So I do not think that there's any going back from what we are doing now.
I would add a cautionary note, if I may, that my experience tells me that international students have come to the US for two primary reasons. The first is the preeminent status of US higher education, perceived as the best in the world. But the second reason is coming to the States and learning about American culture. So universities, if this is going to be an online bonanza, we're going to have to find ways, as Debbie says, to bring the world together online and to share culture in a different way. I would leave it to our audience to think about whether truly, if this is going to be an online world, whether US education will suffer from that, as people will not be able to explore our culture and values.
You know, when I was going to graduate school more years ago than I can count, there was a model whereby we got together as a class in person only twice a year, and the rest we didn't get together. Or shall I say, it was a small, in those days, it was a short ride. I actually believe we could do something like that too, where we could have, I don't know what we want to call it, but blended learning, where if people want to work during the day, whether they are in Shanghai or they're in Kathmandu or they're in Africa, you can work during the day, you can take your classes, and then for a 2-week period, a month, US students can go to a foreign location and everybody can meet, and foreign students can come to the US for some, and it's only one trip. And I believe that blended opportunities like that could be used again also in a more creative way. So I do think that there's going to be a way forward for all foreign students to take advantage of fabulous USA education, and also bring common understanding in the world together. And
Debbie makes a great point as to whether undergraduate education or graduate education may have different outcomes.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, okay, so I was on a mute. So you both are making very important points, but we have to, and of course, for the time that the COVID is raging around the world, these are great suggestions for universities and colleges to have these kind of blended options available. But one of the reasons the international population are interested coming to the United States, young or even adults, is that extracurricular activities that universities offer, which will not be possible if this is online. And of course, to Fred's point, you know, one of the reasons that people are attracted to the United States is the values that the United States presents, you know, anywhere from democracy, opportunities for jobs, and for the students to have an opportunity of practicum after finished university. So if we continue, and of course, I would like to see how you would react to the post-COVID period and what the new administration might do to help with bringing more international students to the United States universities and colleges.
Should Joe Biden win, he will be very open to international education. I think visas will be easier to get, whether short-term or long-term. And in terms of what you were talking about, Alex, with the practicum experience of being able to stay an additional year, I think that will be available. But let's think about it in return. We can make, I don't know that this has ever happened, and I'm not an expert in this at all, but we could even have our Secretary of Education, if you will, negotiate arrangements with other universities to provide that kind of experience to US students so that we can trade on each other's strengths. And so I definitely believe that we are looking at a day where foreign students will be welcome back. But let me tell you that foreign and US students are now working in small groups on Zoom all the time. And I believe that since people are working from home, I don't think that's going to go away. So I think that US universities will provide a fabulous education going forward, and that foreign students may even find a way to work for some well-known US companies by staying abroad, because they're doing that now. So that I think the world is going to be extremely different and better in many ways. I think that US universities will welcome back foreign students big time. It's what all I'm trying to point to is that there'll be, for the foreign students who want to come but are in a situation that makes it more difficult, there will be new unprecedented ways to do that.
Alex,
And it doesn't mean that if you're an undergraduate, it doesn't mean that if you can't come the first 2 years, you can't come the last two, you can. In other words, we'll be very much more open to things like that.
the topic of our discussion today uses the phrase, the American presidential election. But I think that our worldwide audience has to see the broader electoral picture, that what happens in the US Senate in this election will have tremendous ramifications as well. I agree with everything that Deborah says about a Biden administration. It should be more open, more creative. It will establish more funding, at least at the public university and community college levels. However, if the Democrats don't win the Senate, the Biden presidency will be hampered to some extent. So I would suggest that the worldwide audience watches the entire US election result to really understand what the future might hold.
Right,
And
on this point,
unless foreign students and their parents who are listening now, because of COVID, we know that the economy, I happen to be an economist, has been battered all over the world, absolutely all over the world. And that will have implications for our best known public universities. They will probably lose money, and as a result, they will want to welcome foreign students even more. So I don't want anybody abroad to think that if you want to come here and live and you have that opportunity, A, that you shouldn't take it, and B, you wouldn't be welcome. You're going to be welcome with open arms, certainly even more than before. So it's that the new world is going to welcome you back, but it's going to welcome people who now can't come, at least for 4 years straight, to find ways to get the great American education, to connect with the students here, to learn the culture, but stay home. It won't be the same, but think about it this way. US students will want to meet you even more, and they'll want to come visit you even more.
so true. Fred, you discussed the combination of presidency and Senate. If President Trump is elected and Senate turns over to Democrats, what do you think that will do for higher education?
I think that's almost an impossibility.
In case, you're looking at all kind of directions, right? So.
I would assume, and I am not a political scientist, I am not a expert in such legislative matters. I think there's no question, if both houses of Congress in the United States the Democrats will clearly maintain the House majority. If the Senate flips, I think there'll be a lot more pressure on the administration to open our doors again, to take a look at what's going on with visas and immigration issues. You've both alluded to OPT, and I think that a Democratic Senate will really push the issue of how we need international talent in this country for innovation and creativity. So, well, I think I think politically it's an unlikely outcome. It's good that you raise it, but I think there'll be a lot more pressure on Donald Trump to do some of these more creative things and open the doors and welcome people back to institutions.
Right. One of the concerns around the world, and of course we also have agents online and even some partner universities and colleges, MSM partner university colleges. So what would be the impact on the tuition, depending on who gets elected? And would there be any impact on tuition in the future? Is it going to go higher, lower? Because of course, that raises the question of affordability, and of course the international students always pay the full tuition. So what do you think is going to happen with the universities and colleges depending on who gets elected?
Well, I'll tell you that even though the desire is going to be to push up tuition, I think the reality in at least the few years while the economies are recovering will be that we're going to have to find ways not to increase tuition or even to lower it under certain circumstances. This is going to force universities to be more efficient and creative, and that's probably in the long run a good thing. So even though everybody's going to want to increase tuition, I don't know that the marketplace will allow that.
I think there's also a trend that has already begun, which will only be intensified within the states, within the US educational community, and along with the damaged economy that we have. More and more students are going to be choosing public colleges and universities, as well as community college, then moving forward for only 2 years to complete a bachelor's degree. I think that's going to put tremendous pressure on private universities to fill their seats and to maintain their goals. I agree with Debbie that there could be pressure on private universities to lower tuition. Whether lowered or not, certainly increases are going to be moderated. No university is going to be raising tuition too steeply in too accelerated a fashion. Over the last few months, just for the record, not sure if the worldwide audience understands this, the enrollments at US private four-year institutions have dropped off slightly. Enrollment at public institutions has dropped off more, and community college enrollment has dropped off the most at 22%. I think it shows how the economy has been affected in the short term, but I think that's going to reverse itself as our economy gets back, but people still can't pay the top dollar for private US education.
I agree. And if I might, Alex, can I say something, or would you like to go on with another question? I respect you.
Please, no, go ahead, Debbie. Please finish your thought.
I was going to say, for our foreign families and students who are listening, public institutions and private provide unique opportunities in the United States. One of the things we know from serious research is that you do the best at a place where you feel most comfortable and you fit the best. And so smaller places work for some students, larger places work for others. There's a tendency, I know, because I've spent a great deal of time abroad, a lot of time in China, there is a tendency to to think the best school for you is the one that's ranked the highest. But I really want to say to you that I don't believe that that's always the case. Many of the most famous Americans, the most successful, have gone to less highly ranked public universities or private universities. And if they're going to be the most, if they're going to have programs that you like the most or welcome you the best when you're on campus or through their online activities, don't hesitate to go to a place like that. You will do just as well. Look at Joe Biden. The University of Delaware is not, with all due respect, and I think Fred has spent some time there too, it's not one of the most highly ranked, but you can get a great education there. Warren Buffett, who's one of the wealthiest men in the world, spent a lot of time at the University of Nebraska, I think. I'm not calling out Nebraska as being poor. What I'm saying is quite the opposite. If you haven't heard of it, that doesn't mean you can't get a great education. And all kinds of places are going to have all kinds of different opportunities with tuition and with education. And so I think that there'll be even more opportunities now for foreign students to come and find the place that really will work for them.
Debbie is making a great point. I think most of our agents around the world probably understand that, but they have to fight the perceptions of rankings, because that's the easiest way for international parents to get some information. I always start with my students asking, do you know where Ronald Reagan went to college? Ronald Reagan didn't go to a 70th ranked University of Delaware, or probably 150th ranked Nebraska, although I don't know where they are. He went to Eureka College in Illinois, a small liberal arts college. You can get to the top from anywhere. Debbie makes a great point. Given that you're talking about the admission issue, I think there's some real changes that are going to take place, and that agents need to be aware of this in terms of admissibility. As you know, this year in American admission process, almost every school in the country has waived standardized testing, SAT and ACT. TOEFL is still there, obviously, for obvious reasons, but it's been difficult for people to still even register for TOEFL, I presume. But I think this year, as universities are using only grades and the rest of the parts of the application, I think many schools are going to be abandoning standardized testing. For what that's going to mean for international students, I think is huge, and that the ability to analyze and understand international transcripts, agents to be able to explain international backgrounds to US admission offices, I think is going to be a huge, huge thing. It's an issue here in our country if standardized testing is dropped, but I think it's going to have even more effect on international students.
I think you're absolutely right about that.
Fred, you mentioned the public universities to becoming much more prominent, going forward. Given that the state and local governments support those public institutions, and given the shortage of funding, for instance, I know in California, there will be $15 billion shortfall in the state budget. And of course, they are mandated to balance the budget. But if the federal government doesn't come forward, then they have to cut back. There is no other way around it. So if the cutback starts around the country, the universities and colleges have no, how would they be able to fund their operations and provide the instructions?
I think you're making the most essential point about who is elected as president of the United States. With a Democratic president and a more Democratic leaning Congress, there's no question that aid across the board to state and local governments will be put in place. If Donald Trump is elected and Republicans hold the Senate, we can see from the wrangling over the last few months over another stimulus package, you can clearly see that the government is not inclined to help states and local governments. That certainly will extend. There's no question that that extends to the public systems in every state, and I think it will create a real problem. And it's, while we always talk about private smaller colleges closing, it really might be that there's some consolidation in some of the larger systems. Debbie is best aware of the California system of higher education, usually seen as the preeminent public system in the United States. Will in a Republican administration with no aid to California, will they be able to fund all of the UC system, the University of California system, the state colleges, the community college system? I think it's a real question.
I think it's a real question to which I don't have the answer, but I suspect that they will thrive by working together. In other words, to find less expensive ways of doing the same things together. So it'll be less important if you enroll at one of the Cal State campuses versus another, because it could be that they'll be combining programs together and providing them together. So I think that's a different type of creativity that might also be spurned. I also think that we're not talking right now about public-private partnerships, but that is possible. I think it was Alex or who mentioned that we may be seeing more mergers, particularly amongst privates. But that, even though a lot of people will mourn because the college they went to will no longer exist alone or its name has gone away, when you get a little bit larger, that creates other opportunities, and then you have economies of scale whereby you can save money and do even more things. So I do think that that will be part of the picture. We haven't talked much about public-private partnerships, but I think that that's possible together. Imagine what, since you used to live here too, imagine what could happen in the Los Angeles area if publics and privates got together to do very special programs where there was a demand for, but that no one school could do in and of itself, for example. So
Great.
I think, Debbie, to your point, there will be acceleration of collaboration, because in the last economic crisis we had, which was the Great Recession between 2008 and 2014, $5 billion was taken out of the California higher education system. And of course, it raised the tuition tremendously. You know, for instance, in UC system, it's almost doubled. So I think as the tolerance for tuition increase is really being impacted, and I think universities and colleges need to come up with new ways of doing things. Otherwise, increasing tuition is not sustainable.
I think we will. And to our foreign students, wherever you are, when we innovate here, we're innovating, we believe, for the world. And so I actually think that there'll be more opportunities and an even better reason to come here and study, whether you do that for 2 years, 4 years, you go to grad school, or whether you do that part where you live and part here. I actually think that over time, we're going to have even better and more innovative opportunities because of new partnerships and because of new programs that have to start now, and because of a different way of doing things.
Wonderful. Let me pause here and see if there are any questions, because we are coming to the end of our webinar here. And so I'm going to ask to see if there's any questions that has been posed to either of our distinguished speakers. I guess we might. Kath, are you monitoring the questions? Well, in that case, I would love to raise one more point in terms of given that we are in a, as Fred said, inflection point. If you have any closing remarks, either you, Debbie, or Fred, and we can conclude the webinar with your closing remarks.
Deb, would you like to start?
Go ahead, Fred.
I think that Deborah's first comments about opportunity have to be key. She mentioned opportunity and creativity, and there's no question that US universities, as well as government officials, will have to step up to the plate regardless of who is elected tomorrow or this week. I had a more marketing issue and comment. I think international students have always seen coming to the universities in America's great cities as more to their advantage. Coming to Boston and New York and Washington and LA and Chicago, and perhaps overlook some institutions in this country in more suburban and rural areas. There are great universities all over this country. And I think it's an obligation of agents and companies like MSM to make international families aware of those opportunities that may not show up in some of the rankings.
I absolutely agree. And that is one of the points I was trying to make about forget the rankings, find a place that works for you. And a smaller institution in a more suburban or rural area might actually look after your students and provide community opportunities for learning in ways that a larger place can't. So there are always going to be trade-offs, and it's very important for families to think about what would be best for the student, because we know that if you feel comfortable and quote, taken care of by that campus environment, you thrive more and do better. There are all kinds of studies, not only educationally, but in life. So I think we should think much more broadly about places that fit our foreign students, because in the United States, very few people really care where you went. It's how you think. It's what you can do. And I would just say that in a new world, there are going to be even more opportunities that we can't envision now as a result. And even though no one would want a pandemic like this, no one would want an economy around the world that's come to a screeching halt, there are always hidden gems in bad situations. And I think we need to build on those and look for them. And foreign students, we want you to be part of it. We want you to be part of the creativity. And those are eventually things that if you want to bring them back home with you, you should, and you can.
Thank you, Debbie and Fred. As you know, US, in my judgment, going to remain a top destination for international education. And given our excess capacity for students, I think we will continue seeing international students' interest. And of course, you know, we have seen a globalization that is going on, and it will be very hard to stop it. So the movement of people for advancing their education going to continue. And from my perspective, education is the only equalizer, regardless of where we are. So from that perspective, I think education is going to remain a very attractive to younger population to advance their careers and moving forward. With that, let me say a few words about the MSM that sponsored this wonderful webinar. MSM is leading global platform that provides business development and marketing solutions to public and private institutions in the international education sector. It's headquartered in British Columbia, Canada, and operates in 17 countries. It has established global and in-country offices, manage agents networks, and deliver targeted numbers in student recruitment for a real return on investment and sustained institutional growth. The company has added 2 new additions in helping the agents and students to be able to find the right fit for their higher education. One is Unify, which is a portal created to create an open market, if you will, for exchange of information about the universities and colleges. And the newest addition is AJOX. That's another platform that has been created to provide an opportunity for people to learn about online programs and opportunities in the United States and Canada. So we are very pleased that we had this opportunity to provide this important webinar to you. And unfortunately, we couldn't take any questions. I'm sorry about that. But as you know, MSM has moved on to create these webinars, and there has been more than 120 webinars that have been conducted in the last 90 days. And this will continue as we are struggling with COVID, which has changed our lives. And but MSM was very quick to move on to the this space and provide this kind of informative webinars to our constituencies. With that, we will conclude this webinar. And of course, we are one day away from this very important consequential election, which is going to happen tomorrow. And most likely we will know who the next president of the United States is. With that, thank you so much again for attending this seminar, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, thanks.